Hello everyone. Can I please welcome everyone to this meeting of Cabinet. The time is 9:30. The meeting is being held under the regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April 2020 in response to the COVID-19 situation. My name is Councillor Lucille Thompson and I'm Chair of Cabinet and Leader of the Council. There are a few housekeeping reminders to run through as there are new working responses, practices in response to the regulations. First of all, please can I ask everyone present in this virtual meeting that your microphones remain muted and your camera is turned off whilst you are not addressing the meeting, as this will reduce background noise and avoid any unintentional disturbances. Please can I also advise that this is being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website. In addition, a video recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting. Cabinet members and officers, where appropriate, for each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate that you wish to speak or to raise a point of order or explanation, and I will invite you then to speak at the appropriate time. Each member will be invited to speak in turn, therefore I would encourage all members to keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please make sure that you reference the page or paragraph number. Thank you very much. Please note that the duration of this virtual meeting is 2 hours and any business not conducted after this time will be deferred to an alternative date or to the next meeting. And finally, if Cabinet members wish to leave the meeting at any point, could they please make themselves known to me through the chat function? I will then announce to the meeting that you are to leave. So, can I please ask Nancy to undertake a roll call of members of Cabinet to confirm who is present this morning?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Thompson?
Present.
If I could just ask the other members to unmute their microphones and turn on their camera to confirm their presence. Councillor Cutler, please. I'll come back to Councillor Cutler. Councillor Lurney.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yes, present. Good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Present. Good morning.
Councillor Porter.
Present.
Councillor Prince.
Present.
And Councillor Todd.
Present.
So if I just go back to Councillor Cutler. I don't believe he's in the meeting just yet, Chair. So.
Okay. We are expecting him to be present, but maybe he's having some technical issues. If he joins, perhaps you could let us know, Nancy. That would be great.
Yes,
okay. Thank you very much. Apologies for absence. Well, obviously we've got Councillor Cutler at the moment, but we are expecting him. So we'll wait and see what happens there. Item number 2, membership of Cabinet bodies. I don't have any changes to make or any appointments. Is that correct?
Not that I'm aware of, Chair, but I didn't know whether you wanted me to read out a list of officers present in the meeting.
Oh, yes,
well.
please. Yes, please. Yes.
So in the St Giles room today, as well as myself, we've got Laura Taylor, Lisa Kirkman and Simon Finch. And also on the call, we have Steve Tilbury, Simon Howson, Adrian Fox, Chaz Bradfield and Richard Botham. Hopefully I've not forgotten anybody, but I'm sure they'll let me know if I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you. We now come to item number 3, disclosure of interest. Are there any interests that Cabinet members need to disclose? No? No,
I don't believe this. We have a personal interest. In the County Council, but I don't believe it's on the. It's relevant to the agenda today.
Yes, I've got
Councillor
the same. This is Councillor Todd. I have the same potential interest, but there's nothing specific to the to the county council. Although, for example, county council cabinet is meeting at the moment and talking about their response to the planning proposals as well. But it's not it's only a personal interest.
Thank you very much. Nancy, presumably you've made a note of those.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 4 is to note any requests from councillors who wish to make representations on items. I have got a list of councillors, and I will call you if that's agreeable to you when we get to those individual items on the agenda.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now come to item number 5. Oh, item number 5, yes, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of August, pages 5 to 12 in the agenda pack. Are we all agreed that that is an accurate representation of the meeting that took place then?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much. Item number 6. Public participation, and I have 2 people who have indicated that they'd like to speak, and the first one is Mr. Patrick Davis. So can I please invite Mr. Davis to unmute his microphone and turn on his camera and make his representations to us, please. You have 3 minutes, as I'm sure you know now. Mr. Davis.
Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
I can't see any of you, and I can't get the camera to turn on for some reason.
Okay.
I have not, normally I can see you when I plumb in at the beginning, but I've not seen anybody at all. I don't know if it's me or whether it's the technology at that end.
Cabinet members, are you able to see me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think it must be. I think it must be your end then, Mr. Davis. For some reason, it does happen from time to time, but we can hear you loud and clear. So if you'd like,
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Good morning. Following my supplementary question at last week's council meeting, I should like to suggest it might be helpful if in your decision today on the planning paper, there could be a separate resolution seeking further discussions with all Hampshire MPs and the Local Government Association, locally and nationally, for concerted opposition to the proposed changes to the standard method for assessing housing numbers. In reply last Wednesday, Councillor Porter indicated that such discussions were taking place, but it is surely important that it appears on the record that the Council is doing all in its power with neighbouring authorities and other public representatives to prevent a centrally imposed massive increase in new housing building in Winchester. The report in front of you covers many related topics, and I think the officers have made a valiant attempt to answer the 35 questions. However, so long as the government imposed national figures remain in place, sound and sensible planning for the future of our city becomes impossible. The government has also indicated its intention to impose these new figures in the autumn, which will surely undermine the wider consultation on a new planning regime. It is urgent, therefore, for a united campaign to resist these damaging figures, and I would ask you to consider this when you come to the paper. Thank you very much.
Davis, and I welcome that suggestion. I think it's a good one, and we will certainly look to incorporate that when we get to the recommendations. Thank you very much. Could I also now invite Mr. Adams, please, to unmute his microphone and turn on his camera?
Chair, we don't appear to have Mr. Adams in the meeting. I'm just checking to see. I haven't had any messages, emails or anything advising me, so we're just checking to see if we can get him in the meeting and whereabouts he is. But he's not here at the moment, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But while I'm speaking, I'll just confirm that Councillor Cutler is in the meeting.
I've just seen that come up on the chat. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll leave Mr. Adams for the moment, and if he does join us a bit later, we can hear his representation then. So thank you very much. Okay, we now go to item number 7, which is leader and cabinet member announcements. I know that we do have a number of announcements to make, but before we go into that, I would just like to say a very big thank you to one of our senior officers who leaves the council, is taking retirement from the council tomorrow, I believe is his last day, Mr. Steve Tilbury. He's been with the council for many, many years, and I know that we've all welcomed his advice and opinions on matters over the years, and we do wish him well and hope he has a peaceful and enjoyable retirement. I'm sure that we will be seeing him at some stage in the future, but we wish him well anyway. Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Porter, who has a couple of announcements to make, I believe.
I have, thank you, Leader, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to start with a sad one, actually, that once again Headbourne Worthy has been struck by a terrible event. A devastating fire occurred last week. Thankfully, no one was physically hurt, but we'd like to express our sympathy to those affected. And a thank you to the emergency services, all of which attended the scene on that day. And a second one, which is about the Ackwind NSIP, the Nationally Significant Infrastructure Project, the Interconnector, which is the building, as you all know, is being built at Lovedene, and we've been working consistently with Denmead, Hambledon and Newlands Parish Council and with the City Councillors, and since our last meeting we've also briefed the MP, and this has been supported by our Deputy Leader Neil Cutler as well. The hearing with inspectors is now underway and they'll finish in early March. The decision will be made by Kwasi Kwarteng after that. But I'd just like to announce that there are open floor hearings from the 7th of December and our officer Stephen Cornwell requested that specifically so that any organisation or individual could make an appeal at that hearing without having to go through the formality of the whole of the rest of the process. So any person wishing to speak at the open floor hearing should apply via the NSIP website, or if they are really stuck, they can contact the officer Stephen Cornwell, who will be our expert planner for that, or who is our expert planner for this application, and will guide the person through that process of applying to go to the open floor hearing. I'm afraid you have to be quite quick. The deadline for requests to speak is the 6th of October. It's going out on the Denmead and local Facebook pages, but I just thought it ought to be announced at this meeting. Hopefully people will hear it that are interested in planning and might wish to comment. I think that's my main points, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. Councillor Ferguson.
Good morning, Leader, and good morning, everybody. I wanted to make an announcement about the Sunday market on the Broadway in Winchester. We've been really pleased by the widespread support we've had for the recent changes to the Sunday market location to the Broadway, a long-term aspiration of the council and the community. Moving the Sunday market to the Broadway has not only allowed people to socially distance safely, it has proved popular with visitors, residents and traders, and importantly, it is helping to drive up footfall in the high street on a Sunday. Additional footfall that we know is vital to many of our retail and hospitality businesses as they seek to rebuild and recover as the pandemic continues to have a negative impact on business outlook. The Central Winchester Regeneration development proposals include plans to accommodate the market long term in this area, in line with the guidance set out in the Central Winchester Regeneration Supplementary Planning document. Now, while there have been a number of minor teething issues, these have been addressed. So the trial period will continue for another month with a view to making this become permanent. We'll of course continue to monitor the traffic, parking and pedestrian flows, as well as market trading success. But for now, we're pleased to announce that the move has been successful and it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. That is indeed very good news. Okay, I think that is the end of the announcements. So I'd now like to move to item 8 on the agenda, which is the response to the government's proposed amendments to aspects of the existing planning system. And the report is on pages 13 to 31 of the agenda pack. So can I please call on Councillor Porter to introduce the paper, please?
Thank you, Leader. And this paper is in response to a consultation which seeks views from the government to us on 4 proposals. These are the housing numbers. The principle is to be handed down by government rather than based on the housing needs of the district, and they are based on an algorithm constructed by the government, and we'll go into that in more detail in the paper. Removing the need for affordable housing within smaller developments. 25% of all affordable homes should be built and sold as first homes, and to extend the reach of permission in principle. It's proposed that a local authority must base their housing numbers not on the housing need registered in their local district, but on the higher number of 2 alternatives, either 0.5% of the total number of homes currently in the district, or the number derived from an algorithm, or just simply put, a calculation based on affordability. It considers not just the affordability at the time, but the rate of change of affordability over a decade. It doesn't consider the developer's build-out rate, and we believe this is a flaw in this particular algorithm. The threshold for a developer to build an element of affordable housing is proposed to rise from 10 to 40 or 50 homes. Over the last 4 years, this policy has yielded over 147 homes to be occupied at a price that the new tenants can afford. It's life-changing to move into one of these homes. We must not let a single opportunity pass by. The third part of the proposal is placing a requirement to sell 25% of affordable homes as first homes, and because they will provide homes for our citizens. We don't believe that is true. The required discount rate is not enough to place a family in a financial position to pay for it, and the detail about the value of the first home when it's sold on is not clear in the government proposal. The fourth proposal is about permission in principle. It's not something we're familiar with in Winchester. There are elements of this which we definitely don't agree with, including the height limit. Developers do tend to go to the maximum. Transition arrangements, there's no detail about this, but we respond that these new proposals should not be in place until the next local plan. The certainty that that would then provide would enable us to be open and transparent in the way in which we offer the issues and options to our residents. We're not rerunning the presentation today that's been shown. We have made presentations to the local plan advisory group, to members, to the town forum, and an event for parish councils with over 70 attendees. Although it's not actually strictly necessary to do so, we wanted to bring this response to the consultation to Cabinet today so that you know the mode of travel that this Cabinet is actually following. I'd like to add a second recommendation. The responses sometimes have been reworded, and as a result, question 5 has some double negatives in it, and there are a couple of other small typographical errors which need to be changed. So I'd just like to add the recommendation that final changes should be made by the Strategic Planning Manager in consultation with the Cabinet member for the Built Environment, that's me, before submission. And Mr Davis's suggestion to actually formalise the interaction with our MPs and the Local Government Association is a valuable one, and I'm happy to add that recommendation and note that formally as number 3. The second consultation on the white paper, which is planning for the future, has a deadline of the 29th of October to government, and we'll be presenting that at the Cabinet meeting on the 21st of October 2020. For that reason, I'd like to go on to the paper, and the paper recommends that the Cabinet considers and approves the Council's response to the consultation document, changes to the planning system, issued by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government as set out in Appendix A, asking that minor changes are made by the Strategic Planning Manager and that we formalise the interaction with our MPs and the Local Government Association. Thank you. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter, I welcome those 2 further recommendations. I think they're very helpful. I now have a number of councillors who wish to speak on this item, and the first one is Councillor Mike Reid. Are you there, Mike?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Once again, a struggle to get in. I'm glad that you've taken up the 2 additional recommendations, because I think what Mr. Davis said made perfect sense, and I think will make perfect sense to all members, all elected members. This particular white paper is going to have an adverse effect on the way in which Winchester District is developed over the next 15 to 20 years. The most important issue of the distribution of the proposed development across the district, keeping in mind that the district is partly covered by the South Downs National Park, some 40%, and bearing in mind that a substantial increase in numbers sent down from above will mean that the distribution, can't read my own handwriting, the distribution of numbers throughout the development will be divided between the southern parishes and the northern part of the district. For the equality of growth of our communities, it is important that the villages, towns and city take the same proportional representation of the increase. The white paper fails to take on board that nearly all the development and its control, not by elected members, but by the boards of developers and companies, and will have to be built out at a pace that suits them financially. In 2008, when we suffered the first economic turndown, one major development in my particular area literally closed the site for 18 months. I think this report lacks the strength of argument. The response to the wording is poor, and it appears to have been a number of people who have compiled it, and that can be seen by the fact that the presentation is in varying size type form. The majority of the questions which appears do not have been asked or indeed answered, and reports staff that is neither of the MPs. Well, that bit has now been dealt with, hopefully. And finally, I would like to take the most of my working life in the printing profession, and the presentation of the report in its current format is not, I would say, acceptable. It does need to be typographically checked by somebody. At this point in time, I don't think anyone has really checked it to ensure that it is uniform throughout its presentation. I thank the Cabinet for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reid. We've taken a note of the points you raised, and indeed that last point on the typos in the report is really, and the Council's suggested response is precisely why we are going to recommend that further tweaks to it are made by the appropriate officer. Can I now call on Councillor Brooke, please?
Thank you, Chair. I won't be on camera because I'm reading from another app on here, so it doesn't allow the camera to show, so apologies for that. Right, so I've read thoroughly through this paper, and I do wholeheartedly support the stance that it's taking with regards to disagreeing with the many proposals that the white paper holds. I do also support the theory behind it that a change to the planning system could be beneficial to the district, beneficial to our communities and beneficial to developers and beneficial to those who need housing. I would question, as has been previously mentioned, that the way our housing numbers have been calculated raises the most concern and most questions, and also that the temporary allocation of social housing perhaps would cause us issues within the district. I'm not quite clear though of how temporary that 40 to 50 and above would contribute to affordable housing, and then whether it would return to the 10 after that. I would question, as Councillor Reid has, whether this response that we see is robust enough. There still seems to be questions over what proportion would be needed to be completed by the SDNP versus WCC, and it's not clear from this paper the extent of the wider discussions we may have had with our neighbouring authorities and push. Is there an ideal increased number that the administration would be happy with, that they feel would be optimum for our district? The whole of this seems to be negative. It feels quite weak and doesn't state our discussed opinions as strongly as we voiced them. I've taken on board that you said we'll be tweaking this, but I feel that the language needs to be stated more strongly, and potentially some alternatives that would be better for our district, or an alternative way of calculating the numbers, for example, might be beneficial. I feel concerned that Councillor Porter started in her introduction saying you can only be open and transparent about the new local plan if this paper is delayed until the next local plan. I'm not quite sure that that's what Councillor Porter meant, but that's what I heard. It feels as though you've had this paper for several weeks, and the comments within it, although is a good first pass, certainly doesn't state the case that we've all been discussing at the local plan advisory group. I'm also concerned that it says within this paper that it's going to take another 3 months to come up with an action plan, i.e. the action plan would be completed by Christmas. Having had several months already, an action plan should already be in place and from the previous local planning, and should just be tweaked to come alongside these timelines within this white paper. It feels as though the can on the local plan is being repeatedly kicked down the road, and I raise concerns about this for our district and for how this will impact our housing and ad hoc development outside of our control. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke, for that contribution, and thank you for your overall support for the stance in our response. Can I now call on Councillor Horrell, please?
Good morning, Councillor Thompson. Thank you for allowing me to speak to the Cabinet Committee meeting this morning. I just have two points to raise, and they are consistent with some of the points raised by others this morning. And that is that I think the strength of feeling that we have all expressed in recent discussions, members' briefings, parish council discussions, meetings of town council, etc., town forum, etc., that we are all concerned about much of the content of this particular paper, and that we should forcibly give our views back to the authorities. In particular, I think it's absolutely crucial that we write formally, as I have done, to Steve Brine and to Flick Drummond as our two MPs who represent the Winchester district in the House of Commons, to make sure that they're aware of our clear concerns and to ask them to lobby on our behalf against some of these important principles. I'm very happy to participate or facilitate those discussions, but I think those formal discussions with our MPs is absolutely crucial at this time. I also think formal representation to MHCLG again is really crucial, and we can write independently of any consultation responses, and I'm hopeful that generally is an idea that will be approved by all this morning, in that lobbying of those who might have influence within this particular debate. We also discussed at a recent meeting the opportunity to work in partnership with some of our neighbours regarding this document. We talked about aligning with the South Downs National Park on our view that we should have our numbers amended because of the 40% of our district that's represented by the national park, and that should be taken into account and consideration. We also talked about our alignment with push, and so I asked formally this morning that we as a group ensure that we maximise those discussions and those representations with our neighbours, so that the government are very clear about our feelings and the impact that the proposals would have on us as a district if they go forward unamended. And I hope Councillor Porter will take on board those opportunities for us all to work together to make those views known. I also wanted to reiterate the point that I believe Councillor Evans advised us of in the members' briefing, that indeed South Downs National Park was sympathetic to the fact that we were being penalised because of the proportion of our district that is covered by the national park, and that we collectively should find some messaging that we could give to government around that particular point. And Tim Slaney, as their Chief Executive, I understand, would be supportive, and I think that's a crucial element for us as the City Council to take on board. So, Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I hope the points I've made are consistent with others and will be well received, and that we can have a robust response going to government about the white paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Horrell. Just in response to your comments around push, Councillor Cutler is our representative on that body, and I believe they are meeting tomorrow, where they too will be discussing this very item. So we do have input there. That concludes the council members who wish to speak on this item. So are there any questions from members of Cabinet at the moment on the paper? Councillor Todd, you've got your hand up.
Leader, I think there's one thing we haven't has been touched on, but I don't think we've fully explored perhaps in previous meetings, is the item highlighted in question number 6, which effectively says that this would come into effect with almost immediate effect, but overlaid on our current local plan. And I was just wondering what sort of implications that might have if this algorithm was forced on us in the context of our current local plan, because I think that's something that would be useful to understand a bit better if officers or Councillor Porter could provide perspective.
Thank you very much, Councillor Todd. Yes, Councillor Porter, I know you wish to respond also. I'm
going to let Mr. Tilbury answer that. He's popped up on the screen, so I presume he would like to say something.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. The effect is significant in that our local plan is more than 5 years old, and clearly we're not planning within that local plan anyway for the numbers which would be required of us within the new algorithm, and therefore we wouldn't have a 5-year land supply under those circumstances. So that is quite significant. And members have made the point about the implications of that in terms of the additional numbers.
And that's reflected, and that is reflected in the response, because it says that we would be open to speculative and inappropriate planning applications. In the new plan, the new planning system is talking about a 10-year plan, and the 5-year planning supply in theory doesn't hold. Can I just go back to a couple of points that were made by the speakers?
Of course you can, Councillor Porter.
Thank you. The first one is obviously that I'm very happy to accept Mr. Davis's comments. And the one point from that really is that today the team are, after this meeting, going straight into conversations with about the next paper, the Planning for Future, and this paper, and they have the South Downs National Park with them. So that action has been taken. I think that Councillor Horrell suggests we write to the MHCLG and the MP, or perhaps we should write to Dominic Cummings as well. I think that the issues that are in this paper are very clearly placed at the local authority to deliver that housing, not to the developer, exactly as Councillor Reid said. The developers have a role in delivering this housing, and even in this district, which yields really high yields for developers, they still don't build out at the rate at which they should be. And it's been said that it is a bit of a developer's charter. And the third thing really is the conversation about the action plan. And I'd just like to say that the action plan was perfectly reasonable before these two papers came out, but the action plan has got to take these two new consultations into account. It's likely that the first one may be enacted within months, and the second one would be a process that's on its way by the new year, and so therefore an action plan by Christmas seems completely appropriate at this time. Just a last message that I think it was Councillor, I think it might have been Councillor Reid who said, but I'm not sure, about Tim Slaney being the chief executive. He isn't. He's the leader of the planning team at the national park, and I understand that he and his team are taking part in the conversations today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. Cabinet, if there are no further questions, can we go into debate, please? And are there any members of Cabinet who wish to? Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Leader. And I strongly support the overall thrust of the paper that's been put forward. Although actually ultimately my disagreement is on a wider basis, which is in the end the idea that there should be a single national formula, a mechanical formula that imposes a particular number on every single local authority in the entire country, blocking councils that want to grow faster, forcing growth into local areas where planning arrangements like the national park makes the numbers unachievable, is something that fundamentally I think is the wrong approach. And partly that's because we are hit very hard by these numbers. I mean, we need to grow. The country does need to be aiming at 300,000 houses a year. We just need to find a less dictatorial way of doing it. From our district's point of view, it's 2% housing growth a year, 20% in 10 years assumed for every single village, town and city in our district. But because of the way other planning policies work in practice, it won't be possible to deliver. We won't see that growth in every village, town and city in our district. The national park means that a proportion isn't buildable, or won't see that rate of growth, at least based on historic experience. And so the 2% becomes more than 2%, needing to be covered by the rest of the district. And as said, the core issue is that it's another Conservative Party mechanical algorithm that fails to respond to individual local circumstances, just as the Conservative Party's algorithm for exam results failed to respond to individual circumstances. It does an equally bad job. You know, if it can't compensate for the fact that 40% of our district is in the national park, it's not a very good algorithm. But fundamentally, the basic idea of a single number target being imposed from the centre is something that frankly belongs more in communist China than it does in a country like the UK. I much appreciated the guidance, the answer that's proposed for question 6, because we hear a lot about, you know, the sort of disruptive approach that Dominic Cummings wishes to take. But I have to say, increasing our target to over 1,000 houses a year instantly without a local plan in place is about as disruptive as any proposal that the Conservative Party has come forward with, and I think it's absolutely right that there should be a whatever process comes out of this, there is a proper measured way of moving to that system without allowing for housing chaos in the meantime. And finally, also, I'm pleased that we've taken a strong line on first homes. The government's made us go and look at our affordability index. It's a relatively flawed number because it counts the house prices paid by people who live here and the incomes earned by people who don't necessarily live here. But their proposal for a discount effectively means that first homes will be 10 times local incomes as opposed to 13. So it doesn't seem to be making a huge difference to solving the problem, and again is an indicator that we're having national solutions imposed on an area where I think we would want, for example, a higher proportion of social rented housing. Well, absolutely finally, I think I fully support the points about writing to our MPs. I mean, they've been surprisingly noisy on things that they're not responsible for, but they are also, or they're being surprisingly quiet on the things that they are responsible for scrutinising in Parliament. So I think it would be helpful if, rather than that they focus their guns on the things they're responsible for and actually had something to say about these housing numbers in public and were prepared to actually stand up and oppose them. And I think the proposal that we should write to them and ask them to take a stronger line rather than staying silent is a very good one.
Thank you very much, Councillor Todd. I have two further councillors, members of Cabinet who wish to speak, and they are Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Lerney. So I call on Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I'd like to thank officers and Councillor Porter in all the work they've done and all the work that's gone into the response to this consultation, because I know it's been considerable. It needs to be recognised that the nature of the questions in the consultation are restrictive and they don't really allow us to comment more generally about the overall proposals. The consultation concentrates on house building and housing numbers. There is nothing here about the local economy and how the changes will impact on our ability to plan for employment needs, which will be much greater as the population continues to grow. It's not really clear to me that business has a voice at all in the planning reforms or in this consultation, and there appears to be little consideration for how the planning process, the revised planning process, would support specific business sectors or to support employment opportunities. So I would ask Councillor Porter and officers if there is any way to make this point to government in our response to consultation, that we need to be able to speak about this lack of planning for business, planning for employment. I would really welcome that. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Councillor Ferguson. I believe there will be an opportunity to comment on the economy and business needs in the next planning paper that the government is asking us to respond to. So that I hope that goes some way to answering your query. The final speaker I have down is Councillor Lerney.
Thank you, Leader. I too strongly support our response in this paper, and I welcome the widespread support from councillors across the board for that. I think the problem is that the government are chasing after the wrong villain here. I mean, in saying that it's local authorities' fault that we're not building enough houses, you know, that's entirely wrong. Targets and principles don't build houses, developers do. We just have to look in Winchester itself at the Barton Farm development, where despite high property values and demand for housing, we had outline planning permission granted in October 2012. It took several years to actually get the design code agreed and together for that development. Development started in July 2016, on the building of 2,000 houses. 4 years later, we still have less than 400 houses built on that site. It is not local authorities' failure or lack of desire to build for the needs of their local population that's the issue. We need to find better mechanisms for making the developers develop the houses they've got permission for, and then we wouldn't be in this situation. So I strongly support this and would certainly welcome a conversation with our MPs to see what they can do to push for an attack on the real problem, not an attack on local authorities and areas like Winchester.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lerney. I don't believe anyone else wishes to make a contribution, and if that's the case, Councillor Porter, have you anything further to say? Councillor Porter?
Yes, please, if I may.
Yes.
I think we've made a very clear decision to respond factually as far as we can to the questions that were posed. It's very clear that we're being asked questions, they will respond, they will collate the responses to these questions. Any additional work is just mere anecdote to add to it, but speaking to our MPs and to the other local authorities around us, including the local planning authority of the Southlands National Park, is really key for us. It's very clear from the next paper that brownfield land is the top of the hierarchy, and we've always said the same thing ourselves. But we have relatively small amounts of brownfield land, and our developers, all of our developers, put forward greenfield land, and many of our developers are also donors to the very party that's placing this potential increase onto us. I just want to point out to our Conservative councillors that they are the ones helping to get their Conservative MPs into Parliament, and the Conservative government is making this statement to us, is putting this challenge out to us. I believe it should be a factual response, but I'd just like to highlight that actually this Conservative government is imposing these numbers on us. It isn't something that we're negotiating with. I do agree that the conversation about housing numbers is key, but the other 3 points bring up very important points for us as well that have a direct implication for our own district. The first homes and the reducing of the threshold for affordable homes are also very important to us in this paper, and I don't want those to be underplayed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. Can we now move to the recommendations, please? The first recommendation is set out on page 13, and I'm just going to ask the Chief Exec to read out the 2 further recommendations that we have decided to take at this.
Thank you, Leader. The first one for your consideration, Leader, for you to propose is: it is recommended that the Council continues to work with strategic partners and local MPs to influence the outcome of the consultation.
Cabinet, are we happy to agree that? Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, that is agreed. And then a further recommendation.
Thank you, Leader. This one's far simpler for your consideration. That delegation be given to the strategic planning matter. Sorry, forgive me, members, I'll start again. That delegation be given to the strategic planning manager to make minor and typographical updates to the consultation response.
Are we happy with that recommendation, Cabinet?
Agreed.
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 And so finally, the recommendation as set out on page 13, just to be clear for the record, we're agreed to the proposed response as set out in the papers before you. Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for your contributions, including Mr. Davis for his, and we welcomed his suggestion, and I hope he's happy that we've included that recommendation. So thank you very much. Could we now move to item number 9 on the agenda, which is Q1 Finance and Performance Monitoring. And could I ask Councillor Todd, please, to move the paper?
Certainly, Leader, and thank you for the chance to introduce this. This paper outlines the Council's progress against the strategic plan priorities that we laid out earlier in the year, but also includes information on the work that we did on COVID. It shows progress on our Tier 1 projects. It shows what service demand was looking like, and gives an update on the budget position during the first quarter. It also, for the first time, includes comments from a performance panel, which is a subcommittee of the scrutiny meeting, which reviewed this report in some detail. And while it hasn't highlighted issues that necessarily need discussion at this meeting, it is a very useful document, and I would recommend that fellow cabinet members have a good look at the comments made, those that couldn't be at the meeting itself. I think we should be proud of the work done by council officers against our priorities in the first quarter. It was probably the most remarkable quarter in local government that any of us would remember, because, as you recall, April till June was the quarter where we had the bulk of the challenge of COVID, as well as the work that was done in March. And it's a particular tribute to their work that we're able to report progress not just on what they did on COVID, but what they've also done on our other strategic priorities. Let's not forget that during that quarter, we set up a local response centre, we delivered food and prescriptions to vulnerable people across the district, made more than 900 health and welfare calls, we housed the homeless, and provided strong support for business, including the fast and efficiently administered grant programme worth £27 million, and working incredibly hard to make our centres safe and socially distanced. And we were also delivering against our overall plan strategic priorities. Now, other members of the committee may wish to comment on those in more detail, but I'd particularly like to highlight the fact that we cut carbon emissions by 19% by moving to a renewable energy contract. And ironically, there's a county cabinet meeting at the moment, which I think is talking about doing so by 2025. We have put photovoltaics in place on the leisure centre. We have put in place plans for EV charging, and an area of particular interest to me, since it's in my portfolio, we continued waste collections with record high waste volumes, record high glass volumes, higher than they are at Christmas, and yet done so with continued low levels of missed bins, far lower than the situation that we inherited when we took over the council. So overall, I would say this this report highlights firstly the remarkable achievement of city officers in the first quarter in engaging and tackling the COVID crisis, supporting residents and businesses and the district as a whole, but also shows that we have been able to deliver against our strategic priorities, particularly on cutting carbon, and done so in the most challenging of circumstances. So I would therefore ask that you note the progress that we've made and endorse the content of this report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Todd. I have one councillor who wishes to speak on this item, and it's Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, for the opportunity to speak again to Cabinet this morning. As Councillor Todd has accurately reflected, we now have a performance panel working as a group into into the scrutiny committee, and we took a long look at the performance indicators in a separate meeting and provided our report to the scrutiny committee. In the future, we'll be doing this in advance of scrutiny so that when it comes through to you at Cabinet, it will have been reviewed by the panel, reviewed then by scrutiny, and any key points will be visible to you. I thank the officers for getting us on track and helping us to get that cycle of meetings in place. And because we did this very quickly, unfortunately, we were unable to have a number of officers and Cabinet members with us. But in the future, it's our intention that they should attend so that we can answer questions directly with them. I just wanted to raise, I think, 2 or 3 points from the discussions that we had, which I hope we'll be able to address as we go forward. And that is the COVID-19 recovery and restoration plan, which is absolutely crucial as we go forward and with all that's going on, and that some of the information we felt was at a high level and that further detail would be beneficial, and we've asked for that to be reviewed in a slightly different way for the next round of analysis. Tree planting also came up in many of the items we discussed, and we've asked for a review of that, given that is a key part of our environmental plans and how that is working and across the district and the various impacts of that. As we relate to COVID as well, we were very aware of home working and the implications of that, and whether there were other elements that we needed to take into account in our assessments in terms of our carbon footprint, and also the sort of well-being for those working at home. It was clear, because this is a new format and the report is crafted slightly differently, that there were some indicators and explanations required. For example, how the projects are tiered, how they're ranked, the RAG system, how that is analysed, so that members, when they were discussing the various items, could understand that backdrop and therefore provide a better understanding of the data before us. We also raised the issue, which we said we would take offline, of the operator changes around the Meadowside leisure centre facility. That was a point of discussion, and I know that that needs to be addressed in the coming weeks amongst members and with officers. We also felt, actually, and it's an important point, is we have a new system with our 2 policy committees, that we weren't duplicating the work, and that certain elements that we raised would be referred to the Business and Housing Committee and the Health and Environment Committee, so that they could be discussed amongst those members, rather than duplicating the work at the Scrutiny Committee, that they could be done in advance if appropriate. There was much discussion about the movement strategy. Many of those questions were answered, but obviously that's a very key topic, particularly with the changes made for around the COVID measures in the Winchester city area at this point. And also one other area that came up when we were talking about the local plan was the whole issue of SIL. which is one of those topics that comes back as a key point of interest consistently. So, Chair, there was a very long and extensive discussion, some helping us to shape how we review the data more effectively in the future. We thank Councillor Todd for being on the call with us and answering many of the questions that we had, and I hope the notes that we provided and the other discussions that will take place at policy committees and future panel meetings will be helpful for everyone to understand fully the work of the Council as we go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Horrell, and thank you for that helpful reminder of what took place at the performance panel. That was very helpful. Cabinet members, have you any questions on the report? I'm suspecting not. Any debate? Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Leader. One of the things that I perhaps should have made it as an announcement earlier in the meeting, but I think it's relevant to this paper, is just to raise the fact that an internal audit report into business continuity, and I think it's relevant to the response to COVID. There's been an internal audit report into business continuity plan and crisis management plans, and there has been a substantial opinion. That's the highest level we could get on a report, and proves how important and how well the council responded and has responded to the COVID crisis through the summer. So I think it is relevant to this, and I think officers should be congratulated for achieving such a high audit opinion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cutler. Yes, it's really gratifying to know that the response that our officers made to the COVID crisis, and also for the business continuity as well, has achieved that accreditation, if you like. It is really fantastic for our officers, and we've said thank you to them on many occasions, but obviously the work continues. It certainly hasn't stopped, and the crisis is still continuing, and we all know that they will continue to do their best efforts to ensure that our most vulnerable residents are looked after, and that we do actually recover in a safe and controlled way, and we look forward to the time when we can all get sort of back to normal and meet in a normal way. Councillor Porter, you still have your hand up.
Yeah,
you want to say something?
I'd just like to say something. Well, I was going to say, first of all, the same thing as you. We are continuing to hold our meetings with the CCG, and oh, chairperson just disappeared. We're continuing to hold our meetings with the CCG and continue to expect to be supporting many members of our society and our citizens over the next months, and so that responsibility hasn't disappeared. And the second thing I wanted to raise was SIL. Yes, the SIL projects that are coming forward next come to the next meeting on October the 21st. We are very clear that we hand the money over to parishes and community organisations as they spend the money on a sort of QS type basis. But actually at the moment, we're also finding that many of the progress of those projects are hampered by the county council speed, and we're actively having conversations with them to see how we can, and with our own officers, to see how we can change that process, because at the moment the money's there but the action isn't, and often that action is a county council action. So I hope to report back on that on October the 21st. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. Are we ready to note this report if there are no further contributions to be made? Councillor Todd, you wish to say something?
Oh no, I just wanted to thank colleagues for all their comments, and also thank Councillor Horrell for summarising the key points from what was a very productive meeting that we had to review the performance panel meeting, and something that I think, based on the experience of the first one, we will welcome doing in the future. So yes, that was the only comment I wanted to make.
Thank you very much, Councillor Todd. So if we could just move to the recommendation, which is just to note this report. Are we happy to note it, Cabinet?
Agreed.
Noted.
Agreed.
Thank you
Yes,
very
noted.
much. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to say at 10:35 that concludes the business for today. So thank you all for attending, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader.